So I'm sitting here at work, quite annoyed. I scarcely saw my son this year. I couldn't have him over for the summer due to the COVID situation, which has really gotten to me. Finally, to cap it all off, I discovered at the end of September that my wife, whom I have been with for 5 years, had been cheating on me. Since then, I've been looking into everything like a detective, and it's just been a never-ending mess. I've had to cope with her being around the house, acting as if everything is normal when inside I'm seething with rage. I simply want to let go, tell her off, and kick her out. But my lawyer says it's not the proper time yet. I have not been able to sleep in my own bed for about 2 months. I am so fed up that I intend to get rid of that bed the moment she departs, on top of everything else. We haven't been intimate, which has prompted her to accuse me of cheating anytime she tries to show affection. I have to just stand there and accept it, even though it makes me sick. When I look at her now, I can only image bugs crawling all over her. I simply want her out of my life, but I keep getting advised to wait. My patience is running low. It's like being trapped in a room with someone who never stops drumming on a table until you can't take it anymore and want to explode. I can't even talk to anyone about this problem because I'm expected to remain silent until the appropriate moment. I'm so angry at myself for allowing someone to betray me like this again. All I want is for all of this to end, and I truly miss my son. A little update and some background information. I reviewed my wife's internet history, and yes, I have been spying on her. It appears she hasn't been on Reddit in 6 months. At this point, I could care less. I am simply trying to get through each day. To be honest, everyone who has discovered their partner has strayed and has managed to keep it a secret until they can face them properly. You have my complete respect. This is really difficult. I returned home late on Sunday after a grueling 1,400-mile drive. That drive was actually a relief because I didn't want to see or speak with her at all. I was fatigued, so I collapsed into my chair and fell asleep. It was the first good night's sleep I'd had in 2 months. I have lost pound 15 and look and feel dreadful. But obtaining 8 hours of sleep was impressive, at least on Monday. My wife wanted to get closer and start something romantic, but I couldn't feel any desire to her. It isn't like I have any physical issues. Usually when I get up in the morning, everything is fine. It's only that, for the first time, my body and feelings agree that I don't want anything to do with her. This irritated her greatly, and we got into a heated disagreement. I tried to dismiss it by stating, maybe there's something wrong with me because I'm 50 and sometimes things just don't work the same. But then she began implying that I may be cheating on her. She accused me of not being a decent spouse and assumed I was having an affair because I hadn't told her I loved her in over 2 months. Basically, she was attempting to make me feel bad and doubt myself. Yes, I was withholding something from her, but it was because I was piecing together the evidence of her adultery. I remember September 25th vividly since I was in an accident at work. I repair seriously damaged autos, and that day I cut my leg open very badly while working on a truck. It was a horrible haircut. I ended up needing several stitches, and they gave me some severe medications. I couldn't drive, so I called my wife for a ride, but she didn't answer the phone. No matter how many times I called or texted her, I needed her. After waiting for her with no response, I took an Uber home. As we approached my house, I noticed her right there in our doorway, kissing the manager from her workplace. And I mean, they were really going for it, not a short kiss. She was meant to be at her job. I hurriedly shot some photos with my phone before having the Uber driver take me back to work. I remained in the break room for hours, feeling completely confused, numb, and heartbroken after the medications for my leg injury had worn off. I drove home, physically aching from my leg and emotionally drained from everything going through my head. She wasn't present when I arrived. She returned a few hours later and pretended to be concerned about my well-being. I wasn't sure if she was genuinely concerned or simply pretending. I casually asked her about her day and she told me a made-up narrative about work. I understood immediately away that her story was fabricated. A week later, I discovered she hadn't been working on Fridays for the previous 3 years. I hadn't paid much attention to it before, but now I find myself looking for anything related to cheating, and I stumbled across this subreddit and several YouTube videos. I began reading everything I could find here, ticking off all the warning indicators that matched her behavior exactly. She was always addicted to her phone, messaging nonstop, but was never accessible to answer my calls or texts. She had no idea that I had been attempting to contact her from the emergency department for 2 months, desperately needed her. She never even checked our chat history. One day, she began whining about me not being a good enough husband, claiming that I was not doing enough for her. That made me really angry. I grabbed my phone, opened our chat log, and threw it in her face to show her all the unanswered messages. I rarely yell, but I couldn't help it this time. I told her loudly that the one time I really needed her, she completely disregarded me. She checked her phone, read the messages, and then left the house for many hours. When she returned, she apologized before lying to my face, claiming she was too busy at work to notice my calls and texts. The reality was, she was too preoccupied with her employer at our house to answer her phone. Since then, I've been watching her every move. I investigated her phone, laptop, iPad, and even installed cameras throughout the house. I learned that I could track all of her activity using one of her previous phones. For the past 2 months, I've been watching her betray me in real time. And you know what? I used to believe that Apple products were a waste, but not anymore. I ended up pushing away 2 beautiful women in my life because I was still haunted by what occurred with my previous wife. It wasn't only because she didn't love me, it was also about the difficult time I went through following our divorce. I felt absolutely taken advantage of during the divorce. I ended up with only 43 to my name. I don't have a house or a car, no way to get to work, and no support from my family. And I had to stay on friends' couches for years. Everything I made was used to pay alimony and debts. I was just 22 years old and already felt like my life had ended. On my 24th birthday, I hit rock bottom, sitting drunk on my friend's couch, feeling hopeless and considering suicide. Since then, I've kept 43 in my wallet as a reminder of my lowest point. I am not at that dark position right now, but the emotions are similar. Sure, I'm older now, and I've taken extra precautions this time, but catching my wife cheating brought back all of those negative memories. The first time I caught her, I had to return home early and abruptly. This is her excuse. It isn't as it seems. That scenario gradually deteriorated, damaging my divorce significantly. But at least everything was apparent. There was no denying what occurred. All of the therapy I'd undergone seemed pointless. Now I'm back to feeling continuously fooled and lied to. She lies even when there is no cause for it, and it feels like she is always betraying me. I've lost all love for her. This cannot be fixed. Our anniversary falls on Pearl Harbor Day, and I'm determined to make it special for her. But not in a positive way. I am just exhausted. Despite all of the progress I believed I had made in treatment, stress has caused me to have a chronic headache. I feel like I'm back at square one. Yesterday, I finally served her with divorce papers. I wasn't ready to discuss anything then, and I'm still processing everything. I left early in the morning, ate breakfast, and waited for her to go to work. Then I rented a truck, returned home, and changed the locks. They brought along a friend, her husband, and another friend. We gathered up her belongings. We brought out the bedroom furnishings I had given her as a wedding present. She had soiled everything, including my couch and dining table. We put it all in storage and placed her clothes in rubbish bags. So, after everything went down, I discovered that my pal was covering up my wife's infidelity. Didn't tell her right away. He likely has his own mess to cope with. But afterward, my wife texted me, angry, wondering why I told her friend about the affair. So it turns out he did tell her. Amber, the buddy who was covering for my wife, then started blowing up the phone. I picked up and asked Amber how long she'd known about my wife's infidelity. I told her not to lie to me, and just as I suspected, she knew all along, even before my wife and I met. So my entire marriage was built on a falsehood, which was a difficult fact to confront. I questioned Amber why she never told me about the affair. She stated she was frightened I'd lose control and become violent. I informed her that she knew me better than that. She admitted she remained silent since my wife was her buddy. I questioned her if the roles were reversed. Doesn't she want to know if her husband is cheating? She agreed she would. So I ended the call, texted her some incriminating images my wife had taken, gave her my lawyer's contact information, and said, "We're done talking." Later that day, my wife arrived home and freaked out when she discovered I had changed the locks. She knocked on the door and yelled for a time, even breaking a window before eventually leaving. By the evening, 2 deputies arrived, one of whom had previously assisted me in moving my wife's belongings. My wife returned looking defeated, most likely after a confrontation with Amber. I gave her the clothes, a storage key, and my lawyer's card, making it clear that she should only contact me through the lawyer from now on. She began with the phrase, "I love you. We can remedy this spiel," but I was having none of it. She tried to argue that it was also her residence, but I informed her that she had effectively shut herself out and our lives together. When she started yelling, things became really intense. Her "I love you" rapidly turned into a string of angry remarks and insults. The noise forced the deputies to turn on their lights, and several neighbors even came out to check what was going on. I tried to remain calm and did not react much, simply keeping my hands at my sides as she yelled at me. She appeared to have consumed alcohol. Then she started crying, claiming she had nowhere to go. When I told her I didn't care, she startled me by throwing a punch, resulting in a fat lip and a bloody nose. I did not fight back or attempt to stop her, just let her release her rage. She also attempted to scratch my face, but the deputies intervened and stopped her. I decided not to bring charges against her. I simply wanted her to leave. The deputies prepared a report that could be useful later on. Honestly, I'm relieved she acted out like way after she left. I began to experience all of the emotions I'd been suppressing for the past 2 months. I'm pretty tired right now. I expected to feel better once everything was out in the open, but I don't. I've been very sad and sobbing a lot lately, which is unusual for me. My phone has been filled with nearly 600 unanswered texts and calls. I'm avoiding our mutual acquaintances right now because I don't want anyone trying to make things right between us. I did not call my son like I usually do each night. I'll talk to him tonight, although he probably won't be too unhappy. He never liked her very much. On a more current note, we signed our divorce papers today. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was plenty for an uncontested divorce, which should be completed within 2 months. That's some good news, though. I'm still pretty sad about everything. During the divorce meeting, she barely glanced at me, which led me to believe she couldn't face me. Her lawyer appeared to be aware of the gravity of the issue. They even inquired about the possibility of reconciliation, but everyone knew it wasn't. We requested she completely divulge all she did, which she had already documented. So as I read what my wife had written about who she slept with, I noticed that she had left out a couple of individuals. I didn't know about it. My lawyer showed her photographs from our security cameras and inquired, "Who are these guys?" However, she was hesitant to reveal the information. They asked us to leave the room for a while, and when we returned, her lawyer wasn't pleased. It turned out that the 2 mystery males were from recent online hookups. She admitted to cheating on me from the beginning, but said she stopped seeing the other person shortly after we were engaged and during our first year of marriage, even though I don't think I should believe anything she says. I inquired if she was ever truly faithful to me. That's when she admitted to cheating on my coworker's husband on July 4th last year. Even worse, it happened at our place while we were hosting a cookout. This last year, she became even more adventurous, meeting up with strange people she found online. I didn't even bother asking about all the details, such as whether she had met anyone in parking lots or not. I wanted to talk with her alone for a while, so I urged the lawyers to respect our privacy. I asked her all the whys. Why cheat? Why marry me? Why not simply say no if she doesn't want to be with me? She claimed she loved me and desired the stability of marriage, but she also acknowledged she had been in love with one of the men for 10 years. She saw me as a safe option as her time was running out. Turns out both she and the guy she was cheating on were fired because my coworker Amber made a big deal at work. My soon-to-be ex-wife is currently residing with her parents, and I'm not sure what's going on with the other guy and his wife. She aired another shock, revealing that she had an abortion 2 years ago because she couldn't identify the father. We tried for a child early on and then simply enjoyed being together. I might have been the father, but now I'll never know. That was enough for me to simply walk out. People say I escaped a bullet, but it feels like she stole something valuable from me. If you've ever boxed, you'll know when you stop feeling the punches. They are hitting you and causing harm, but you are numb to the agony because it is all too much. That is precisely how I'm feeling right now. She could claim responsibility for anything ridiculous, like causing the Chicago fire, and I wouldn't blink. I phoned the lawyers back and changed my tactics. I decreased my alimony demand because I want this divorce to be over as soon as possible. I joked about forcing her to undo her affairs as a condition, but what was the point? It isn't like that would change anything. I was deeply shaken by the abortion news. I can't bear the thought of being obligated to her through alimony payments. Each month, she is reminded of her betrayal, so she accepted the divorce terms. At 5:43 p.m. and in about 2 months, everything will be official. I get to keep my house, retirement, and all of my belongings. There is no alimony either way. She walks away with $73,000 from our funds, and she never contacts me again. I couldn't care less about what happens to her right now, for her sake and the sake of everyone she meets. I hope she goes to therapy, but I'm done caring about her. I do not feel relieved or lighter. The last few months have been terrible, and I'm still not thrilled with the abortion revelation, which I believe will haunt me for a long time. I don't know what I'll do next, either now or in the future. Maybe once the divorce is finalized, I'll feel some sense of relief, but who knows? For now, all I want is to be left alone. I've done a lot of thinking and pondering on every decision I've ever made, and I can't think of a single instance where I thought I did the correct thing. It's a terrible mindset, but it's all I have at the time. The only tiny comfort is that, unlike last time, I was able to keep my belongings. I've determined I won't go through this again. A quick update on the divorce. It isn't official yet. Being alone in the house began to wear on me, so I ended up with a new roommate. She's the most adorable little Latina I've ever seen. She's little, about 8 inches tall at the shoulder, weighs around £5, and has a lovely underbite. I can't decide whether to name her Maggie or high fructose corn syrup because she's so sweet. It turns out I adopted a 1-year-old Chihuahua from a shelter. I only needed a happy face to return home to, and I found her. Another update. I got what I call my second failed marriage diploma in the mail today. The entire operation was slowed by a huge blizzard. Strangely, I am neither happy nor sad about it. Some friends recommended celebrating failure, but it doesn't set well with me. Right now, I'm feeling very numb about the entire scenario. I anticipate it to hit me unexpectedly. My ex contacted me today and I answered, assuming there was no harm because everything had already been done. It turns out she's a disaster. She didn't apologize. I just questioned what the point would be. I'm not sure if she regrets anything she did, but it doesn't matter now. Here's when things become difficult. My son is the closest thing to a grandchild that her parents have ever had. He asked if it was acceptable for him to contact them, and I said fine. But I'm not sure how to communicate with them without include my ex in those talks. Don't these situations seem to complicate everything? Despite everything, I care for them. They're possibly my son's only connection to kin on my side. And what about my little Chihuahua? I've decided to name her Shishi. Thank you to whoever proposed the name, which is easy to say and has stuck. She was an absolute lifesaver during the snowstorm. We had no power or heat, and the temps were frigid. She did, however, keep the bed warm like a tiny hero. So I've chosen to take a major break from all of this. Maybe I'll come back when I'm ready to date again. Or simply seeking for something. Chill. There's always this tiny voice in the back of my head telling me that she doesn't really love me and will abandon or break me. Right now, that voice is louder than ever. But right now, I'm doing okay. I'm realizing that being careful, like being afraid of getting burned by a hot stove, isn't a negative thing. I know I need a lot of time to recover and work things out. I want to offer positive sentiments to everyone here. Just because we've been mistreated does not mean we're useless. Stay strong and take care of yourselves. I love you both. Update. Today is exactly 1 year since I handed my ex the divorce papers, which would have also been our 7th anniversary. I awoke feeling fairly decent. I went for a run, made breakfast for my kid, and then proceeded to work. Everything was going well until about 10:30 a.m. when I was summoned to the workplace because there was a delivery of cookies for me, which she did every year. I merely told my coworkers they could take them. Our customer support representative inquired as to who had supplied the cookies, and I informed him that no one had touched them yet. I was annoyed, wondering who had told her where I now work. But other from that, I've been in a good mood. She still finds ways to let me know she's nearby. For example, her auto payments were late, so the finance firm calls me. But there's a lovely twist. My great buddies surprised me with a barbecue and beer party when I returned home. They felt I might need some cheering up. To be honest, my day was going great before that, but the celebration was the perfect finishing touch. Here is the next story. My name is Travis, and I am 32 years old. I'm here to tell you about how my marriage ended. I had been married to Lauren. She was 5 years younger than me. I liked her far too much and let her live her life as she pleased until she did something very unacceptable. Even though I was unwilling, I had to ensure that she never made the same mistake again in her life. She committed an inexcusable act that needed to be punished. It was a difficult decision, but I knew that allowing her to continue without penalties would simply encourage her behavior, regardless of the agony it caused me. I understood that infidelity was wrong in any relationship. I caught my wife lying and cheating, so I exacted my revenge to ensure that she faced the repercussions of her conduct. Lauren and I met at a friend's party 9 months ago. I was immediately taken by her attractiveness and wanted to know her better. I asked my friend to introduce me to her so that we could start a discussion. My friend introduced us and then left us to talk. She was pretty easygoing, and our chat went quite smoothly. She informed me she loves attending parties and enjoying her life on her own terms. She was ready for any challenge that came her way. After speaking with her, I liked her even more than before. She was not just attractive, but also quite clear about her goals in life. I decided I wanted to meet her again and get to know her better. We started meeting each other, and I realized I couldn't stop thinking about her. She made me feel like no one else did. My friends had warned me about her wild personality and continual changing of men, but I paid no attention. I trusted my instincts and knew she felt the same way about me. Lauren and I had only known each other for 6 months, but I knew she was the person I wanted to marry. I took her on a visit to a private island. She was impressed by the extensive preparations I had made specifically for her. One evening, as we were enjoying cocktails at sunset, I proposed when I felt it was the right time. She immediately agreed and said sure. She hugged me and began crying, telling me that this was the finest day of her life thus far. We had a royal wedding and were the talk of town for about a month. Everyone spoke about our wedding everywhere we went, and the media attention was tremendous, with news outlets and social media platforms abuzz about our fairy tale romance. People were captivated by the love tale we told, and it seems that everyone wanted to be a part of our joyful celebration. Even strangers approached us to congratulate and provide their best wishes, making us feel extremely privileged and appreciative for the outpouring of love and support. On the day of the wedding, Lauren and I decided to keep our belongings in 2 separate rooms. We would sleep together at night, but live our lives separately. I realized we hadn't spent much time getting to know each other before we got married, so we both agreed to continue living our lives as we had previously. Until we could find a rhythm in our lives and give each other space, we recognized the necessity of preserving our uniqueness and personal interests, even within the limitations of marriage. So we gave each other space and time to pursue our own hobbies and aspirations. We hoped it would enhance our bond and help us to grow individually and as a pair. We rarely interfered with each other's schedules and did not always check in on each other. I was largely preoccupied with my business, and adding one more thing to my schedule would be inconvenient. I trusted Lauren to take care of herself and let me know if she needed anything. This level of trust and independence in our relationship enabled us to encourage each other's personal development while maintaining a good balance between our independent and shared lives. It also fostered a strong sense of independence and individuality, as well as mutual respect and admiration. We realized that addressing our own well-being will ultimately contribute to the strength and happiness of our marriage. Lauren wanted to celebrate her marriage to me with her friends, so I planned a 5-day cruise with 5 of her closest friends. I didn't feel the need to join them because it would only make things unpleasant. I had no problem agreeing to anything my wife asked for as long as I could afford it, because all I cared about was her happiness. I believed that giving her the opportunity to spend special time with her friends would make the vacation even more memorable for her. Plus, I knew she'd have a great time and make lifelong memories with her closest pals. Lauren continued to live her life in the same way she had before we married, going to parties, getting home intoxicated, and going to bed. I made her sit one evening and asked her whether it bothered her to behave this way. She stated that everything was new to her and that she would need time to adjust to her new existence. She said that she was not born with a silver spoon as I was. so all of this was quite overwhelming for her. I attempted to figure out what she was saying and decided to give her more time to imagine herself as the wife of a wealthy man. It had been over 3 months since we married. Lauren did not come around and remained in her separate room. She would lavish me with love, and we would spend passionate nights together. However, something was still missing from our connection. Despite our physical intimacy and tenderness, we maintained an emotional barrier. I couldn't help but wonder whether Lauren was keeping her guard up and maintaining her distinct area due to deeper difficulties. I wanted her to absolutely trust me and feel as comfortable as possible because this was her home and where she belonged. I was wondering if I should talk to Lauren about my sadness and concerns about our relationship. Would she take it in good humor and try to understand where I'm coming from? I decided to wait a week before sitting down with her and discussing our feelings, and if we were on the same page, I decided that this would be the best strategy so that no one would be hurt. I arrived home early one day to gather some materials for an important meeting. Lauren did not appear to be at home. Perhaps she was out with her friends. I was preparing to take my papers from my room and depart. I decided to see what Lauren's room looked like. Perhaps I could find some clues there to assist me better understand her. As I sorted through the materials, I began looking for a diary or notebook that she kept. One of her lipsticks fell on the ground. I reached down to pick it up and noticed a piece of paper underneath the dresser. It must be important, so I tried to get it out. The invitation was for a private gathering. I opened to find out more about it. I could see that the celebration was in honor of Lauren and had been planned by a group of males. I was drawn to something near the bottom of the invitation. It was addressed to the most beautiful woman ever, who deserves the adoration of every man on the planet. I looked up the party's address. One of my business competitors had the luxury mansion. I decided to attend and see for myself what this party was all about. On the way to the party, I contacted Lauren to see where she was. She informed me that she was having a sleepover at one of her friends' houses and would be home by tomorrow evening. Lauren had no incentive to lie to me because I gave her the freedom to do whatever she wanted. I trusted Lauren not to lie to me, and all I wanted was confirmation that she was not at the party. I was certain that there was something fishy going on at this gathering, and I needed to find out. I arrived at the destination and parked my car outside. I saw no one at the gate, so I entered. As I came inside, I could hear loud and happy music that deafened the ears. I noticed a lot of automobiles parked along the path leading to the villa, right at the entrance. I noticed Lauren's car parked, indicating that she was at the party rather than at her friend's house, as she said. I headed to the front door but chose not to ring the doorbell. I began walking along the wall to check if there were any windows I could peek through. I proceeded a little further and saw one of the windows with its blinds open. I tried to look carefully so I wouldn't get caught. I could see a group of men standing with drinks, laughing. The music was too loud for me to understand what they were laughing at. I was so focused on figuring out what was going on that I missed the obvious. The majority of the men wore very little clothing. Some of them were bare-chested, while others were simply glancing at something beneath them. It was too low to see what it was. I couldn't understand what Lauren was doing at such a gathering. I was about to give up and ring the doorbell when I noticed something emerging from the earth. Lauren was standing in the middle of the males, hands on her breasts and wearing only her underpants. I was left numb. I was unable to feel anything. Just as I was about to conclude that this was the worst thing I'd seen all day, one of the men approached Lauren and kissed her. She turned around and giggled as they began to hoot. I was enraged and angry. I decided to barge in and take Lauren away. I began walking briskly towards the main door when I had an idea. I returned to the window and began to take notice of everyone at the party. There were 6 men, and of course, Lauren. I was angry and frustrated about what I could have done if I had taken Lauren away. All 6 of these men were my business competitors, and I couldn't allow them to mock me because of Lauren. I decided to leave and let them get on with their activities. I knew I had to figure out how to embarrass all of these men while also teaching Lauren a lesson. I walked out of the village to my car and drove like a madman, unable to process all I witnessed. Lauren received all she ever wished for, and more. I was amazing in bed, and we had a lot of wild nights and days. I didn't understand what Lauren was missing or why she needed to go to such extremes just to have fun. Anyway, wondering why Lauren did all of this is pointless. All I could think about was how to get back at Lauren and the men who were having a crazy time with my wife. My mind was overwhelmed by rage and betrayal, fueling a fervent desire for vengeance. As my wrath rose, I needed to design a strategy for holding them accountable and restoring my sense of justice. I promised to make them pay for messing with me. Lauren returned home the next evening as she had promised. I waited for her at home to see how she would react after everything she had done since last night. She appeared rather calm and cool for someone who cheated on her spouse with not one, but 6 men. I attempted to play along by asking her how the sleepover went. She said it was fun, and she spent a lot of time catching up with her pals. I waited for her to get ready so that I could exact my revenge. Lauren came and sat next to me. I informed her that I was arranging a 2-week business trip and would require a personal secretary, for which I had already hired someone. Her name was Catherine. I informed her that she would be taking care of me for those 2 weeks. I called her into the living room to present Lauren to Catherine. Lauren greeted her and invited her on board. I asked Lauren to relax so that I could talk to Catherine about a few things. She stated that she was quite fatigued, which is understandable given that she had sex with 6 men. That certainly would have been exhausting. Lauren didn't seem thrilled that I was showing such personal interest in Catherine, but she had no choice but to agree. I began walking with Catherine in the opposite way, placing my hand on her buttocks and making sure Lauren noticed it. I spent nearly an hour describing what Catherine's role will be. She was hired specifically to upset Lauren and cast doubt on my relationship with Catherine. I wanted Lauren to confess on her own about her wild activities she had been carrying out behind my back. The next morning, Catherine walked into our bedroom to wake me up so we wouldn't be late for our meeting. Lauren was surprised Catherine had access to our bedroom as well. I immediately prepared and assured Lauren before she could ask any questions that I would see her in 2 weeks. Catherine and I left, and I planned to spend the next 2 weeks at a motel, keeping an eye on Lauren and her activities. I also had to get thorough information on every one of the men that attended the party. I took sure to collect as much proof of actions as possible to ensure that I covered all bases and used them at the appropriate time. During my stay in the hotel, I painstakingly documented Lauren's strange interactions and conduct, as well as any potential ties she may have had with the men at the party. In addition, I carefully obtained all 6 men's business and personal information so that they could not get away with messing around with my wife. I hired a personal investigator to look into all of the men and provide me reports on their personal and business relationships. Lauren was a unique situation, so I decided to spy on her myself. I was curious about what she would do while the 2 weeks I was away. I waited for her to leave the house since I knew she wouldn't invite any of her lovers over. She left home at lunchtime. I followed her car to see who she was meeting. She parked at a hotel and met Matt Ryan, my main competitor. They ate lunch together, joking and smiling. Ryan occasionally placed his hand on Lauren's thigh. She didn't try to shove his hand away. After lunch, Ryan drove her to his villa. I knew what they were going to do at the villa, so I didn't want to waste my time following them anymore. My private investigator had emailed me some information regarding Matt Ryan. I was able to obtain Matt's fiance's contact information. I went to the phone booth and called her. I informed her that Matt had planned a surprise for her, and she had to meet him at this place. I gave her the address and waited for her to arrive. She arrived after 40 minutes and drove directly inside. I had already bribed the security officers, and they allowed her in. The main door was unlocked because there was no reason to secure it. Matt's fiancée stepped inside expecting a surprise, but was not prepared for the shock that awaited her. She spotted Matt in a compromising position with a lady she didn't recognize. She shouted at Matt, flung the engagement ring in his face, and began storming out of the villa. Matt followed behind her, telling her she was mistaken, but she believed what she saw. She informed him that she would not only end the engagement, but would also withdraw all of her assets in his firm. I was sitting in my automobile, enjoying the scenery in front of me. I told myself 1 down, 5 to go in the same way. I obtained information on all of the other men and gathered evidence of their adultery to their wives or ensured they were caught red-handed in the act. As a result of their cheating, the majority of them lost their investments or were forced to pay large amounts of alimony. I had one major surprise for Lauren, I invited all of Lauren's men to a party at a new venue so that she could cheer them up during this terrible time. In addition, I emailed Lauren an invitation from all of the men, telling her that she was the only lady who understood them and would never criticize them. This gathering was to commemorate the link that they all had with her. I ensured that the villa was fully prepared before the party began. Everyone arrived on time to the party. I made certain that everyone left their phones at the entrance before entering the villa. This was part of my plan so that they were cut off from the outside world. Lauren walked in wearing a sexy, red, backless dress that I had gifted her. I was amused at her shamelessness to even wear something that I had given her to enjoy herself with other men without even an inch of guilt. I had installed cameras everywhere in the property, even the toilets, since I did not want to miss any form of behavior. The celebration started with music and drinks. They slowly started dancing and kissing each other as the party went on. I opened the link to the live stream of this party to all of the companies involved. The live stream started playing on every TV screen in both my company and everyone else's companies who were invited to the party. I had taken all their phones and placed them beside me in the monitor room. As the party progressed, their phones started ringing, some from their managers and some from their families and friends, to let them know that they were on a live stream and were being filmed. I put everyone's phones on silent and enjoyed the show with a bucket of popcorn. In the 2 weeks that I had been following Lauren, one thing that I understood was that she never loved me. She was only with me for the money and the privileges that she would receive as my wife. I should have known better not to fall for someone like her who was nothing but a gold digger. To be honest, I would not have had a problem with it because I understand that people get attracted to money. That was still okay. But what I was not okay with was that she tried to fool me by acting as a loyal wife. And she was not only having an affair, but she was having an affair with people I would have to deal with every now and then. I could see the looks on their faces when they would come to talk to me about a certain deal and make me feel inferior, because in their hearts, they knew that they were having the best time of their lives with my wife. That was something I was not okay with. I knew I was doing the right thing by exposing not just Lauren, but also sending a message to all those men that they made a really poor choice by messing with me. I collected the entire footage from the party and left. And I left a message for Lauren and told her that I would be arriving tomorrow. The cameras were still recording them, sleeping together in one bed, naked and on top of each other. A few of the men even got up in the morning and left. Lauren was the last one to leave. She looked at the message on her phone and quickly made her exit to reach home. I gave her enough time to get home, freshen up, and prepare for my arrival. After I thought that she would be ready, I made my entrance along with Catherine on my side. I hugged Lauren when I saw her and then started talking to Catherine. I acted as if Lauren was non-existent as I completely ignored her. Lauren stood there for a while, and when she saw that there was no response from me, she stopped her foot and left. I could see that my revenge plan was working. It has been 2 days since I came back from my business trip, and I have been trying to avoid Lauren as much as possible. I knew that all her lovers were busy with court cases and defamation cases against them and could not contact her anytime soon. Lauren was still unaware of the footage and the chaos it created, as I had blocked all of them from her contacts. As days went by, I made sure that Lauren felt ignored and unwelcome in her own house. Catherine was the one calling the shots regarding everything around the house. She was the one letting the cook know what to make for breakfast, and also what kind of diet that I would be following. When Lauren tried to correct her, she would just smile and tell Lauren that I have now changed my preferences and I'm willing to chuck out old habits and give her a snarky look. Lauren came to me complaining that Catherine has been overtaking everything in the house and having a say in things that she was not appointed for. I told her to stop overreacting to everything. Catherine was much better at organizing all this and was doing a much better job. However, Lauren still felt frustrated because she believed that Catherine's involvement was unnecessary and intrusive. I wanted her to blame me for cheating on her so that I could play the reverse on her. I told Lauren the next day that I wanted her to spend some time with her friends, so I booked a club where she could take her friends along to have some fun. I knew that she had been feeling a little out of place at home since the past few days. I would be busy till late at night so she could catch up with her friends and come home after entertaining herself. This would help her lift your spirits as well. I was still having someone tell her and give me reports of her whereabouts every hour. There was no way I was going to trust her ever. I needed her out of the house so that I could prepare everything for a fun ride that she would be in for tonight. Little did she know, tonight would be a night she would never forget. As I meticulously planned every detail, excitement grew within me, eager to see her reaction to the surprise I had in store. Lauren came home around midnight, fully drunk. As she walked into the living room, she noticed me sitting on the couch with Catherine on my lap. She could hardly make sense of what was happening. She walked towards us and screamed, "What the hell is going on?" I looked at her, smiled, and asked her to join me. She looked at us disgusted and asked Catherine to get off my lap as Catherine was about to get off. I told her to sit back. Lauren was fuming with anger. She said that she knew that there was something going on between the two of us right from the day Catherine walked in. She knew that she was not just my personal assistant. I smiled at her audacity to blame me for cheating on her when she was the one doing exactly the same thing. I asked Catherine to leave us alone and walk towards the home theater. Lauren walked behind me with great difficulty, making sure not to trip, and stood beside me. I switched on the TV and something round. She started playing on it. She did not understand what it was, but as she kept looking at the screen, she understood what I had put up on screen. The color drained from her face when she realized that it was the footage from her night with all the men. She looked at me in disbelief that she did not know what to say. She just kept staring at the screen and finally asked me where I got it from. I laughed at her question. I was amused that she did not even try to defend herself. I replied very casually that I recorded it myself. Her eyes widened in shock as she processed my response. She stuttered, trying to find the right words to explain herself, but nothing came out. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence as the weight of her actions hung in the air. I could see the guilt and regret written all over her face. It was clear that she had been caught red-handed and was at a loss for words. She was now struggling to come to terms with being caught in the act. I sat on the couch and started watching the footage with so much enthusiasm. She was just looking at the screen and at me back and forth for a while, as she did not know if I was angry or amused by what was going on. I started commenting on what I saw on the screen. I told Lauren that I really liked what she did with one of the guys. It was a skill about her that I loved. I motioned her to sit beside me so that we could go about the entire footage together. She had no choice. So she sat beside me and started watching it with her head bowed down in shame. She knew at this point that she had messed up big time. As the footage played, I couldn't help but notice the discomfort on Lauren's face. It was clear that she regretted her actions and was aware of the consequences she would face. I made her sit through 2 hours of footage and told her that it was entertaining. I never knew she had such close friends who were so comfortable in their own skin around her. She had nothing to say in her defense. She started very meekly with a sorry. She told me that she got carried away by all these men. She said that they talked her into a challenge of spending a night with them. She couldn't let a few men win against her, and that was the reason she went to the party. I really liked how she was so fast at making up the story. I nodded, letting her think that I was buying her story. I tried to play a little with her to see how good she was at making up shit. I told her that I understand that she was being cornered by these men, but she could have used the identity of being my wife to get out of the situation. She said that she did not want to ruin my reputation and hence did not mention who she was. I was impressed by her story-making skills. The ease with which she was lying was unbelievable. I acted as if I felt sorry for her being the victim in all of this, just as she thought that it was over, and I bought her story. I made her walk to the dining table to give her a glass of water. I made her sit on a chair and placed the glass on a piece of paper. She picked the glass and noticed the paper. It was the same invite that she had hid under the dresser. The glass fell from her hand and shattered. She knew in that instant that there was no use making up stories, as I knew everything that she had been doing all this while she fell to the ground and started crying profusely. Tears were the only thing that could save her. There was nothing else that she had to say. She could not defend herself, as there was nothing I did that could have led her to take such drastic steps. After confronting her and making her admit to everything she had done, I kicked her out of the house, as I had no room for a cheater like her, both in my heart and in my house. She kept begging me to give her another chance, but I learned from my mistakes and don't repeat them ever. She said that she was not thinking straight and got carried away. All of them were rich and she could not say no to them. I firmly stood my ground, knowing that forgiveness was not an option. It was a painful decision, but I knew it was necessary for my own well-being and self-respect. Moving forward, I vowed that if I ever were to like another person, then I would definitely test her worthiness to be a part of my life. This was the biggest lesson I learned from Lauren's betrayal. Within a week, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I made sure that she gets nothing from me after all the chaos she caused in my life. I made sure that a few pictures and videos of her cheating were circulated in the media to name and shame her. I made sure that I destroy any credibility that she had so that it would be difficult for her to get a job anywhere. I had warned all the major companies against hiring her. I still had a private investigator tailing her so that I was aware of what she was up to. I wanted to let her know how difficult life would be without me in the picture. I wanted her to regret every day of her life going forward for cheating on me. I made sure that she does not get a place to stay easily and is insulted everywhere she goes asking for a job. She did not agree for a mutual divorce and demanded alimony. I could not hold back my laughter at her blatant demands of money and property. She even faked to be pregnant to make sure that she gets at least child support and property under the child's name. I showed the judge all the pictures in which she was surrounded by so many men in all kinds of compromising positions. I told the judge that I was never that intimate with her to blindly agree to the child being mine. I asked to get a DNA test to make sure that it was actually mine. As they took her for the test, they came to know that she lied about the pregnancy. I put a defamation case on her along with the divorce case. She pleaded to the judge that she had no money and no source of income to pay me. Well, she should have thought about all of this before she decided to cheat on me. This was all the drama that had happened to me in the last 3 months since I got married. I am writing all of this just to lessen the hurt and pain that I have been feeling. It was very difficult for me to stay on this path of revenge and make sure to carry on with it till the end. There were times when I was so depressed that I didn't even want to do anything. Lauren was the first person who I thought would be different from all the other girls that I met in the past. She did not come off as a gold digger at first, but all she wanted was my money and property. I now understand her reluctance from the beginning to share a room with me. She would not have been able to hide all her dirty actions if we were living in the same room. It was a painful realization, but I'm grateful that I discovered her true intentions before things got even more complicated. I could literally relate with the saying, "Love is blind." For me, it was both blind and untrustworthy. I know it is going to be a difficult walk for me starting here. She not only ruined my marriage, but also my reputation. I can see the way people look at me as I walk past them. There is pity in their eyes, and some even have a mocking expression that I got fooled by a woman who was cheating right under my nose. It's disheartening to witness the judgment and scrutiny from those around me. The weight of betrayal is heavy, and it's challenging to navigate through the aftermath of such a devastating revelation. I would like suggestions and opinions from all of you guys to let me know if you agree with everything that I have done, and also how I should live my life going forward. All this drama has impacted my judgment in such a way that I keep second-guessing myself all the time. I would appreciate any help that comes my way. Thank you for reading. A simple suggestion led to my husband divorcing me. I didn't end up doing what I was thinking, but I had to pay for it. Maybe I should have given it a deep thought before telling him. And now I'm being served divorce papers. I never thought that suggesting to open our marriage would not sit well with my husband. I thought he also had the same idea, but I never knew we were far apart. My name is Jessica. I'm a 26-year-old fashion designer. The name of my husband is Fred, and he is a 29-year-old banker. My husband and I have been together for 3 years now. My husband and I met at a family function that my mother hosted. I was invited to attend that function since I designed most of the dresses worn by the ladies. I loved my work, and my mother was very proud of me. I didn't exactly like going to those kinds of parties because my mother was always trying to match me with somebody. On that fateful day, I met my husband, Fred, talking to my mother, and like every other day, I didn't even look his way. I quickly spoke to my mother and left before she could introduce us. On my way running out of the event at some point, I ran into Gabrielle. Gabrielle was such a lovely woman. I met her through my mother and I had made some dresses for her. She was always very kind to me and she supported my work. I respected Gabrielle a lot and that was why I followed her when she pulled me back into the event. She kept on talking about how her grandson is sweet and all, and at some point I had to tune her out. I thought it was time for me to leave when she pulled me across the hall to where my mother was standing talking to a man. Gabrielle introduced him as his grandson, Fred. And at that moment I was very much interested because Fred is a very handsome man. Fred and I got talking and he told me about what he did for a living, and he complimented me about my work, which I was grateful for. Fred and I exchanged numbers, and from there we started speaking. At that point, I did want to be in a relationship because I had just left one which was not very good. Fred had assured me he was not like every other guy, and I believed him. Fred took me out on dates, which I was very happy with. He was very attentive to me, and I loved that things were going smoothly. And at some point, Fred asked me to be his girlfriend, and I accepted. I was skeptical about it because I genuinely loved Fred, and I knew he loved me too. While we dated, I discovered that Fred had lost his mother at a very early age, and he was raised by his grandmother, Gabrielle. I got to meet his whole family. His grandmother, who he adored so much, was his everything, and she approved of our relationship. Few months later, Fred and I got married in a very beautiful way. I could say that I was totally in love. We bought a house together and we moved in together. Our marriage was beautiful. At some point, and we were the ideal couple. We went out on regular dates, went on vacations, attended so many functions and parties together. Our lives were moving perfectly and felt surreal. Of course, we had different arguments from time to time, but we always found our way back to each other. We didn't really stay mad at each other for long and had our ways of settling each argument. A year into our marriage, things began to change. I started traveling a lot for my work and I didn't have time. Fred also got promoted and most times he was not at home. It was as if everything was not in our favor. Whenever I had time to spare before a trip, Fred could be in another state. But we made sure to find time, even if it was an hour in those days to spend together. It got worse at some point that we didn't see each other for over 6 months. Sure, we talked on the phone and made video calls, but it was different. I was busy creating my designs. One day when Gabrielle walked into my office like every other day, I thought it was going to be a very good afternoon with her talking about random things, but it wasn't. I felt like everything started from there. She scolded me about not being present in my marriage and how I was neglecting my house and all. I decided to make her understand that I wasn't neglecting my duties as a wife and that Fred has been busy with work. And she told me that Fred had complained to her that I am no longer available at home and that work had taken most of my time. I was shocked to hear that because it was Fred who I had not seen in a couple of weeks. I knew we went 6 months without seeing each other, but after that I decided it was not going to happen again, and I hired more people to work for me in order for me to spend more time with my husband. And so when Gabrielle was talking to me about what Fred had said, I was disappointed. I made Gabrielle understand what was going on, but she didn't want to see things from my own perspective. I understood how much she meant to Fred, and that's why I decided to let her go on and on about what she didn't really understand. When Gabrielle left, I was so angry because I felt like if by chance Fred and I had issues in our relationship, he shouldn't talk to his grandmother first, but to me, his wife, in order for us to solve the problem. After a few days, Fred returned from his trip, and I decided to talk to him about his grandmother's visit, to which he apologized and said at that time he didn't know what to do, and we hadn't seen each other for 6 months, and he needed to speak to someone. I understood what he meant, and we decided to resolve our issues and cut back the hours we were working in order for us to have enough time for each other. Fred began to work less, and I also did the same. We started coming back home to each other early. I started cooking dinners for us. We hung out with friends, and it was as if we started dating again. During the next couple of months, we celebrated Fred's birthday. It was celebrated in grand style. I trusted Gabrielle to take such things to the next level. We also invited friends and colleagues. It was indeed beautiful. A year later, and we were back to where things were. We were working more now, and we saw each other. We could only meet during Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners, and at that point I felt like we were drifting apart. I hardly saw Fred, which I was not happy about. At some point I started thinking that maybe he was seeing someone else. I didn't want to think too much into it, and I decided to take my mind off things. I was busy with work when my mother came to visit me. She complained about not seeing me in months, and I had to explain to her that I had been occupied. She had asked about Fred, to which I explained things to her. My mother was a typical housewife who didn't understand the need for a woman to work if her husband was providing for her. That's why she was always responsible for putting together events for my father when he was alive. And that had been her thing today. But I didn't want to be a mere housewife who was responsible for taking care of events. I wanted to make a name for myself. I knew she was not going to understand, so I let it be. Apart from me being in love with Fred at that moment, she contributed to me marrying Fred. She kept going on and on about how I was too successful, and I should be grateful. I saw a man who was willing to marry me. I knew she meant well, but that wasn't me. I had always wanted to work for my own money. My mother left my store, and I received a call from Gabrielle saying she would like to see me and my husband Fred in 2 days' time, and that it was very urgent. I didn't know what was going on, and so I said I should call Fred. I called him, but it went straight to voicemail. I knew he had been avoiding my calls, but I thought I had given him some heads up concerning what his grandmother had said. I wondered what she could possibly have to tell us. I hoped she was not sick because she meant a lot to Fred, and that could break him. I thought to myself, and I didn't know what to do when it was time to go see Gabrielle because I still haven't got hold of Fred. I decided to go there and explain things to her, but on getting there I saw Fred talking and laughing with his grandmother. I was very shocked. Fred came back and didn't think to return my calls or even come back home, and to make matters worse, he was behaving. We were not having issues in front of his grandmother. That threw me off balance. He was portraying a happy family in front of his grandmother, and we didn't see each other for weeks. I decided to have a talk with him when we were left alone, and he had told me that he didn't want to disappoint his grandmother and that I should play along. I asked him why he ignored my calls and decided not to answer me. I felt at that point Fred had changed. He was not the person I married. I knew we had been busy and all, but that can't possibly drive a rift between us, right? Gabrielle returned, and she sat down and we began talking. Immediately, I asked if she was sick, but she responded. She wasn't. The reason she called us was because Fred and I had been married for 3 years now without children. I felt taken back. I looked at Fred, and he looked indifferent. Before I could understand what was going on, Gabrielle started crying, saying she was getting old and she needed to see her grandchildren before she died. I was about to explain to her that it cannot be possible right now, when Fred interrupted me and said we could give her what she wants. At that moment, I felt like crying because my husband was not listening to me and he was promising Gabriel something we should have discussed as a couple, instead of him taking the decision on his own. I looked at Gabrielle and she was very happy. I wanted to speak with Fred, but he left saying he needed to attend to something. Few hours later, I left Gabriel's house. While I was on my way home, I thought about everything and I was very sad. I got home and I saw that Fred was at home. I decided to confront him about what had happened, but he said he was going to make his grandmother happy, whether I liked it or not. And I tried to explain to him that we can't bring a child into our midst because we barely had time for ourselves and that a child could complicate things. I told him that we should really explain things to Gabrielle, to which he bluntly refused. Fred seemed not to listen to me at that moment. All he cared about was how to grant his grandmother wishes, and also to make her happy. I'm not against birthing a child. Not at all. I just didn't want my child to lack attention from us. And also, I didn't want my child to be left in the hands of a nanny. The fact that Fred didn't understand me at that moment made me very upset, and we ended up a heated argument. He didn't see things from my own perspective, and I think I also didn't understand where he was coming from. Yes, every couple would literally want to have a child, but in our case, we barely had time for each other, and so bringing in a child at that time was a very bad idea. Truly, I wasn't ready to quit my job, and so also, Fred wasn't ready either. I didn't have a problem working, but I have a problem staying at home doing nothing. I didn't want to be a full-time housewife that would always stay at home watching TV and doing house chores. I'm not trying to condemn those that are full-time housewives. Honestly, it is not a bad thing to be a full-time housewife, but that life is not for me. I love my career with passion, and I like putting a smile on my clients' faces. I wanted to also put a smile on Gabriella and my family, but it seemed like I wasn't doing enough because I literally did try to make them happy. Most especially Gabriella. Weeks went by and Gabriella constantly reminded us about wanting to see her grandchildren. And so one day I called my husband and told him that we really need to settle this issue of having a child. Of course, he didn't feel the heat like I had felt back then because everyone thought I was the problem. Fried was guilty. In fact, we both were guilty, but he made it look as if I was the problem. So Fred and I talked on the phone and I asked him if he would be home the coming weekend so we could patch things out. He told me to give him about 30 minutes so that he could get back to me and that he was in a meeting. I agreed and we ended the call after getting off the phone with my husband. I picked my bag and headed home. It was time for me to close for the day, so I went home and hoped that my husband would keep to his promise and return the call. I arrived home and met an empty house as usual. I had my shower and changed into my pajamas. I was about heading to the kitchen to fix something for dinner when my husband called. He apologized for not to the time. We asked ourselves how our day went, and I asked about the meeting he had that day, if everything went okay, and he responded positively. I said I asked him if he could come back that weekend so we could talk things out, most especially the child aspect, and he assured me that he was going to come. We talked about a few things on the phone before we ended the call. I went ahead and had my dinner and watched my regular TV night shows before I retired to bed for the Night World Cup the next day, very early, and headed home. Apparently one of my good clients had booked to be styled for a photo shoot, so I left home before 5 a.m. I went to the client house with my crew members and all the equipment we needed to carry out our job. It was a birthday photo shoot, and we needed to deliver effectively at the photo shoot. I met my old schoolmate, Becca. I was a year older than Becca and also a year ahead of her when we were in college. It was a mutual friendship, and Becca seemed calm back then in school. I asked her what she was doing in the studio, and she said the lady I was styling at that moment was her cousin's sister. She just came around to her cousin's sister with a couple of things. She also told me that she had no idea that I was the stylist that always styled her cousin. She complimented on my style of fashion and hoped to be like me someday. I felt so happy, and at that moment I was very proud of myself for being able to put this through all by myself. It was a proud moment for me guys. LOL. Becca and I chatted for a long time while I left my crew members to work. I usually left my clients with my crew members because I also wanted them to learn, and so I gave them a chance to represent me, which they often deliver effectively. Becca. I talked a lot about school, businesses, and personal life. I really enjoyed conversing with Becca. I was so engrossed in the conversation that I literally forgot what I came there to do at first. I also showed her the work I had done and a few other things. And so, guys, I really had a nice time with Becca. 30 minutes later, we all were set to leave and beat ourselves. Farewell, Becca, and exchanged contacts and got in touch with each other. I and my crew members headed straight to the store and continued our daily routine. It was at that time my phone rang and it was my husband calling. He called to tell me that he would be coming back home the next day. I got off the phone and continued with what I was doing. So guys, the next morning I didn't go to work because it was on a Saturday. I don't normally work on weekends because I decided to limit my workload. That day my husband was expected to come back home, and so I waited for him. Few hours later, Fred arrived home and I welcomed him as usual. I wanted him to have a rest before telling him what I had in mind. He went and freshened up, and a few minutes later he came down to have lunch. I went to the sitting room to continue watching my movie. Now, Fred later came over to where I was seated and asked me what was so important that I had to call him over to discuss. He told me he was curious to know, and he paid attention to me. At that moment, I didn't know how to put it out to him because I'd gotten so furious. Somehow, I mustered the courage and told him we should open up our marriage since we barely see each other or spend time together. We would still be a couple, and our families don't need to know about it. I also told him I wasn't ready to have a child just yet because we both don't have time, and I wasn't ready to be a full-time mom. I wanted to concentrate more on my career until I was ready. Immediately, I said that Fred yelled at me and almost gave me a slap. He was shocked and at the same looked at me in utmost disgust. I saw through his eyes that he was really disappointed in me. Fred left my side and went inside the room. In that state of anger, Fred broke a lot of valuables and even broke our wedding pictures. I tried to calm him down, but he didn't listen. I ran out of the house because I didn't want Fred to harm me. So guys, I told Fred about my suggestion and he got really mad. I haven't seen Fred that mad ever since we were together. Maybe I woke up the beast in him. Update. Hi guys. I have gone through all of you guys' comments and I really appreciate it. I have also seen the hateful comments and truly, I deserve all of that. Let me get straight to the point. So guys, I ran out of the house in fear because I had never seen my husband that mad before. I went to my mom's house to explain what had happened. Honestly, she was really disappointed in me. I explained to her about how Fred and I weren't that couple we always portrayed whenever we were in the family gathering. At that point, she didn't stop reminding me of how she was irritated by my own foolish suggestion. The following day, I got a call from Gabriel. At that point, I already knew that my husband had already told her about it. I couldn't pick the phone because I was very ashamed of myself. I got up that morning with swollen eyes. Apparently, I had cried all through the night after thinking about what I had suggested to my husband. I thought he also wanted to open it up since things were not like before. So I didn't pick the call and didn't return it back either. It had been 10 hours since I had left home and my husband didn't call me. He switched his lines so I wouldn't be able to reach out to him, just when I was about to leave the bed. I got a knock on my door. I didn't answer. And after a while, the person opened the door and came in. It was my mom. She sat down on the bed and told me Fred had sent something for me. I got up in the hope that maybe he wanted to see me. I got curious as to why he had to send me a package. I opened it and found out that it was divorce papers. I couldn't believe my eyes. My mom hugged me and patted me to stop crying. The divorce papers were already signed by Fred. I was left to sign it. My husband knew I would come see him after seeing the divorce papers, and so he traveled out of town that very day. He instructed our family lawyer to come back the next day to collect the papers, after I had signed. So 2 days later, after Fred left town, I signed the divorce papers and handed it over to the lawyer. It was a tough decision, but I had to make it because there was nothing I could do to change his mind. Update, guys. It has already been months since my husband and I both went our separate ways. I moved out of my mom's house and managed to get a place to stay. I didn't want to go back and start staying with her. I wanted to be independent and have my own place. Fred moved on, and he never spoke to me since the last time I ran out of the house. I also have moved on with my life. I want to try and put my life together and also try out new things. Most times I usually go to my store and get myself busy so as to make me forget all that has happened in the last few months. Gabrielle never called back, ever since I ignored her call. I know I must have really hurt her, but I guess she wouldn't want to see my face again. So guys, this is my story. I hope you all have learned something from this. I hope none of you would make the same mistake I made. I should have never told my husband that. I guess this was a lesson well learned. Thank you for taking time to hear today's story. If you loved the story, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a tale to share regarding your own or someone else's circumstance, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.